Hello and welcome to Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. We are your messy, imperfect homeschool mom friends, and we're so happy you're here. My name is Amanda, and my fabulous co-host is...
Hello, I'm Meagan.
So today's episode, we'll be comparing and contrasting some of the most popular complete curriculum online platforms. As the demographics of who is homeschooling change and shift, more parents are leaning into complete online curriculum options for their kids. So today we'll be discussing those options and the needs that they can meet, hopefully. A lot of them, they can do the entire curriculum, sort of, but many can also, do the option of just an elective or two, or, maybe a specific, like we're going to use this one for just ELA or just math. And we're going to be talking about all of that. So today we'll be discussing some platforms that I am sure you're probably very familiar with. It's kind of hard to be in homeschooling and in any sort of social media group and not hear a lot of these names. And maybe one that isn't as well known, because Meagan threw it in there as a ringer at the last minute. So stay tuned to the very end so you can hear all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. I was searching for something that I wasn't getting from some of the others. And so, yeah, I branched out. So we went about our research process in a multi-pronged approach. We each researched the platforms on our own. So Amanda and I both looked into all of them. We were looking at how much they were, what their customer service was like, how comprehensive is the curriculum, what does the reporting look like. We went through all that stuff. But there's a really important factor in determining an online homeschool program, and that's your kids. So we roped one of my kids and Amanda's awesome kiddo into testing each of the platforms for us, which was a very interesting partnership. We wanted their feedback about the UI experience. How's the interface? Is it easy to move through? If you went in there and first of all, some of them have a placement test and some of them don't. But either way, depending on what your starting point was, how was the curriculum then when you got there? Like, were the lessons too hard, too easy? Are the videos engaging?
And in other words, we had our kids test a slew of these so that hopefully you will have less trial and error when you actually try to choose the right platform for your kids. Now, it was great looping our kids in as well because they picked up on all kinds of things that I didn't necessarily see. And it was pretty interesting. Like some of the feedback between the two kids was really different, right? So this is one of those good examples of what works for one kid doesn't work for another. What works for one certain type of learner doesn't work for another. And hopefully, if we like it because of X, Y, and Z, but your kiddo isn't X and Y, it'll help you figure out well, maybe just because that was their favorite, that's not necessarily going to be the best for us and so on. So yeah.
Yeah, completely. I love that. So before we fully dive in, I'd like to throw out a disclaimer as the person who edits these recordings. There's a chance that this episode ends up being a two-parter. Sometimes we're going and we see the clock ticking and we're like, oh, we gotta go. So there's a chance if this goes long, we'll just split it into two episodes, part 1 and part 2. Now, I don't know if you saw, Amanda, did you see that the Kelsey brothers just signed a podcast deal with Amazon for $100 million?
I did not, but I quite like them, so I'm excited about that. I like the clips.
I am too. Yeah. I know I don't know anything about sports, but I do like the clips. They just seem like fun people. But we aren't them. We don't have a team of editors and producers. I edit and do that thing. So if there's just a wonky cut somewhere along the way, or it's a clunky thing, you've been warned. But truly, I was thinking about it and I'm like, Amazon, homeschool moms have to be in one of the top demographics of people who spend money on Amazon. So I'm just saying, if they have other lucrative podcast deals that they're looking to throw around, we're here, we're available. So we always start our episode with a recap of our weeks, and you were on the go this week, Amanda. How was your week?
Yeah, we've had a good week. We did in the middle of the week, right? So we're recording this after Labor Day weekend, and since it was a holiday weekend, we decided to jet off but stay kind of local, right? So we did sort of a staycation, and we headed to LA and had a good time, right? We walked around Rodeo Drive and checked out a Lotus car shop, because to do our research, right, to properly do research on Beverly Hills, we watched Pretty Woman. And so they have the actual Lotus car from the movie there that you can see. And my kid absolutely loved that. He thought that was amazing.
That's so cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's in a shop close by. And I think if you didn't know what you were looking for, you might have missed it. And then lots of pool time, and we went to the Libri Tar Pits. And yeah, I mean, generally we just had a really good time. But that has made this week a little hard, right? Because there were some things that I really probably should have addressed before I checked out for the long weekend. But like most people, I checked out before the end of the workday on Friday and was like, yeah, long weekend. So I've been struggling this week to catch up on all the things and rest up. I love traveling. We've talked about that. We do part-time world schooling, but it does always kind of kick my butt and take a little bit of extra time to recuperate and stuff. So yeah. And then just before this, I did a class with my kiddo. We do an art class together and I really enjoy it, but I've discovered that I actually really dislike chalk pastels.
Ooh.
Chalk pastels. And I don't like the mess. I don't like the texture. I don't like the feel. I don't like chalk pastels. But today we did like maybe Tim Harrison or something like that inspired artwork. So it was kind of fun.
That's so fun though. I love that.
There'll be a big mess to clean up when I get done recording because chalk pastels go everywhere.
Times. That's a balcony project next time.
Yeah. Yeah. So how about you? What's been up in your world?
I'm too tired to even remember what has happened in the last week, I think. Yeah, it's just been, I shared last week that my kiddo had surgery. And so we've just been kind of laying low because he's still couch bound. The unfortunate thing is that he had to withdraw from the semester for school. He had his surgery. The surgeon couldn't really tell us until they got in there, like how extensive the situation was going to be and all that kind of stuff. And he told us that in the thing, like it's, I could get in there and it's going to be way worse than we realized or whatever. And so he's still completely horizontal and couch bound. It'll be 2 weeks tomorrow. So, in college world, if you're 2-3 weeks behind, you're done, right? There's no coming back from that. So thankfully he didn't seem to be too upset about it. But so yeah, we've just been kind of laying low and getting some stuff done and whatever. So I think I have like nothing interesting going on. I did post in our Facebook group that we hosted the other day that I bought tickets to go see Andy Grammer later this month. And I love Andy Grammer. So I'm super excited about that. We're supposed to go to Atlanta and see Jane Goodall speak. So I'm super excited about that. And next weekend we're going to Baltimore. My boys are playing Pokemon and I'm pumped because I'm going to go to DC and be a museum nerd while they play Pokemon all weekend. So it's going to be good. So it's been quiet, but we've got some fun stuff coming up at least. But nice. All right, so let's kick off our online platform review. We have so we had the thing like we talked about where we evaluated stuff and we had our kids evaluate stuff. These first two, our kids did not evaluate because they weren't even an option for us, right? So, but they get talked about all the time. So we thought we would come in and tell you why they're not an option for us, what our issues are with them, et cetera, and then we can go from there. One of them, so these are Acellus or Power Homeschool. It has two different names, and Mia Academy. And Mia Academy was initially on our list for evaluating. And then when I started it, I texted Amanda with some stuff and was like, and so we scrapped it. So we were like, it's not even worth pursuing. So Acellus and Power Homeschool, again, you'll see both names. They pop up in Facebook groups all the time. It wasn't even on our radar. We had never planned to assess this one. There's two divisions of Acellus. There's an accredited division, which is super duper expensive, and a not accredited division. For the other platforms, we'll tell you the prices. My experience with Acellus is the price is all over the place, so it's not even worth us telling you what the price is because it could change tomorrow. There's a bit of whiplash that goes on over at Acellus as far as like what we're doing today and what we're doing tomorrow is completely different. So I have some experience with that. We used it years ago and I would never go back.
Okay, so we have never used it. We've never tried it. But the first for me is that while it says it's secular, it isn't actually considered secular by the secular homeschool community. We won't go into all of that here, but it's an easy Google or Facebook search if you want to know more about that and why something can say it's secular, but it not actually be considered secular. Mm-hmm. So a little bit more information on Acellus/Power Homeschool. It's owned by Roger Billings, who is a Mormon who split from the Mormon Church over his devout support for polygamy. After leaving the Mormon Church, Billings founded his own church, the now defunct Church of Jesus Christ in Zion, which, there are lots of different ones, but that was his. And in that church, he is considered its patriarch and prophet. That doesn't really align with what I'm looking for and where I want to spend my money. There have been criticisms that some of the degrees held by the educators associated with Acellus may not be legitimate, as they were reportedly granted by Billings himself through institutions that he controls. So maybe they don't actually have the accreditations that they're saying they do, more a bought and purchased instead of a like studied, bought and purchased accreditation.
Bit of a Trump University vibe to it, doesn't it?
Right. Yeah, a little. Right. A little. Billings also has a controversial background, including, facing allegations related to academic credentials, the church, and just there's like. So another issue with Acellus Power Homeschool is that Hawaii removed Acellus from many of their school systems after their queen's name was misspelled in the curriculum. Like, if you can't get important facts like that right, and it's been brought to you over and over, and you still don't bother to change it, that sort of says everything you need to know about how much they respect real facts and history. And the same also, right, that curriculum talked about how the Hawaiian Islands were discovered by Europeans, which again is that kind of like Eurocentric whitewashed stuff that in our house we try to avoid.
Yeah, exactly. So I have not used Acellus in many, many years, and it was fully Acellus. Power Homeschool wasn't even in the mix at the time. I have heard that Power Homeschool became a name in order to more easily entree into school systems, but that doesn't seem to make sense to me, because why would you call it Power Homeschool if you were trying to get into school systems? My own personal thought process is that it was a rebrand, right? There was a lot of stink on some of the stuff that had been done previously. And so that was my own personal thought, but I don't know why it has two names. So it was fully Acellus though when we used it. So my brain still kind of defaults to that. We were using it back in like 2018, 2019, and we were 95% of the way unschooling at that point. But I was nervous to like just cut that cord. They had lowered the price of Acellus to $10 a month. And I thought, okay, for $30 for my 3 kids, I'll put them all on there. And I'll at least for that 5% of my traditional schooling world, I'll have kind of an anchor to the real world and I'll have some peace of mind. So we put them on there. The customer service was absolutely horrendous. My youngest, because he went into kindergarten, there was no placement whatsoever. And it was just like, well, because they're kindergarten, there's no need for a placement. It had him like counting bears on a screen. And I'm like, this is a kid who should not be counting bears on a screen at age 5. To try to get someone to help me adjust the level was it took like a month on top of it to even get help. It took so many attempts. So anyway, we had used it, I think, in 2018. And then over that summer, no problem. We took a break. We traveled. We were planning to go back to it in the fall. All of this mess unfolds in about 2 to 3 days where Roger Billings comes out and says, I'm thinking about making Acellus free for all of you. But I'm thinking about partnering with school systems in order to offset the cost, right? And it might mean some changes to the curriculum and this, that, the other thing. So as much as I think he's a really unscrupulous, horrendous person, that was a genius business move, because what ended up happening was all of these families that were in his Facebook groups and stuff like that were the Acellus managed groups, were like, we will pay extra if it means that you won't involve the public school system, right? Because how many homeschoolers are afraid of the public school system and government interference and this and that, right? So he literally has these people now begging to pay more in order to do this. And then by like the next day, he's like, okay, scrap that plan, but now it's $25 a month. So he more than doubled the price like overnight. And all these people, I mean, it was just, and there was no mass communication. It wasn't going out to their full email list to all parents who were subscribed. It was only going out to people that were in their Facebook groups and things like that. The communication was terrible. The plan literally changed every 24 hours for like a week as far as what they were going to do. And my understanding is he did something similar this year where he does these hard 180s and you're left in the lurch, right? Completely left in the lurch. And so, yeah, I mean, he just isn't a person I would give a penny to. Like if it was the only homeschooling option there was, I would, get a tablet like Flintstone style and write out curriculum with a bird's beak before I would give that man money. So yeah, he's not my pick. Okay. So steer clear.
Yeah. And like I said, for us, we just haven't even really looked at it, right? There's enough there. And there are so many other options out there. We don't need to spend our money there.
Exactly.
So that brings us to our next one. So our next one is Mia Academy. It's known as Mia Academy, I think, and then Mia Prep, right? Mm-hmm. For the older kiddos. This is another one of those that I looked into a little bit, and it's just not for us, right? We're not going to put our money there. We try to be conscientious, and obviously we fail sometimes because I do use Amazon, and I realize, and I like Starbucks from time to time, right? But we're not using the Academy. One of the reasons for that is it used to claim that it's secular, and sometimes it still does claim that it's secular. In other places, they say that they're neutral, and neutral is one of those funky things that still allows them to sometimes be included on like charter school, public fund vendor list kind of things because they're not religious. However, they don't specifically say one way or the other whether it was evolution or the Big Bang Theory or things like that, right? Usually neutral especially comes down to science and whether or not they're putting forward a science fact-based science curriculum, or they're being more like, well, you can decide, you can teach in your own home what you want to teach, which I'm not about that. And, in a lot of ways, it just seems like they're kind of playing all sides, trying to make sure that they get as much money as they can and keep everyone happy while still having Bible classes and things like that are on the platform. And I just like, I don't need to, I'm not, no, we're just not, we're not doing anything that has Bible classes. That's not our family.
Not happening.
Yeah.
So it was, like I said, it was originally on our list to test because we didn't realize the extent of how ick it was until we really started digging in, and we had seen it everywhere. And so we were like, okay. So I had read on a couple of threads on Facebook that there was a lot of Christian content, and that that their study of Judaism, they have a worldview Judaism class, was anti-Semitic. And we had our kids test stuff, but my kid is probably not going to pick up on nuanced anti-Semitism, right? If it was, horrendous, I don't even want to say
in your
it.
face. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just that, if it's super in your face,
exactly.
Jews are bad and,
yeah,
we're the superior, yeah, okay. But
that he would have picked up on. But if it's nuanced stuff, which is what it was, so he wasn't going to pick up on it. So I was like, let's watch this together. Okay. So I will say these are elective classes. And this is the argument that is used to bring Mia into the mainstream. But they're electives. Okay, fine. But the way that they're presented is completely different. Okay. So I started with the Judaism class, and I didn't find screaming anti-Semitism. It was factually based. The facts that were given were correct in as many lessons as I got through. I didn't go through the entire study of Judaism. We are Jewish, by the way. I've said it in previous episodes, but so it was, they were talking about Rosh Hashanah. It was all accurate information, etc. Right? It was little things though that were like, at one point, the person who was recording the video said, the Torah, which consists of the first 5 books of the Bible. And so, right, it's like there's a Christian-centered atmosphere there where it's like the Bible is the mainstay, and we will use that as the jumping off point for all of our comparative analysis for everything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one. The other thing is the Torah didn't come from your Bible, right? Jews were around for thousands of years before Christianity was invented. So you got that a little backwards, right? But so it was really nuanced stuff that kind of leaned into Christianity versus other religions, right? But then I went into the Christian class to watch that. And the Christian class just assumed that I was a Christian, right? So it wasn't delivering facts to me. It was this really chipper girl who was teaching the class who was like, do you ever want to send Bible verses to your friends? And I was like,
no.
The only time I want to send a Bible verse to a friend is if I want to send the things about wearing mixed fabrics to somebody who's spouting off the Bible as a homophobic, thing, oh, the Bible says blah, blah, blah. I'd be like, yeah, well, the Bible says you also can't eat crab. So, I'm just saying, that's the only time I ever find the need to send a Bible verse to someone, believe it or not. And then at one point in the lesson, she was like, so go grab your Bible and let's get started, right? And so it's assuming there's just this natural assumption that I have a Bible. It's super handy. I can just grab, right? All this kind of stuff. I do not own a Bible, shocking. And so it was like the Judaism one was fact-based with a little Christian lens. And then the Christianity one was totally through a Christian lens, right? So I have no problem with teaching world religions. I love teaching world religions.
Yeah.
I think it helps us understand, some of the conflicts that go on and things like that, and the differences and the similarities. But if you're going to present religions, they all need to be presented from the same neutral stance. And this was definitely not the case. So.
Yeah, right. And so the other thing for me is, and this is one of those things, right, that comes from parent feedback, right? Mia Academy isn't coming out and vocally saying, hey, we're homophobic and transphobic, but they are, unfortunately, if you're going to take parent feedback. And so it doesn't take very much looking and digging online to find cases where, one mom, her elementary age kiddo had drawn rainbows during a Pride Month unit study. And they had that mixed in with the artwork behind them in their workstation or their kind of classroom area. And it was taken down, right? It was like blocked out and that kind of stuff because it was objectionable. There's another mom who has a child who's non-binary, and they chose to wear clothing that had that kind of stuff represented, right? Whatever that looks like, whether it's the flag or rainbows or, kind of whatever. And their shirt was censored out because it was objectionable and they didn't want that kind of stuff upsetting other kids in the class, which I'm just, like, we talk about freedom of speech and how, all of this kind of stuff. And then you pick a curriculum that specifically doesn't let other kids wear things like rainbows. I'm just not there for it, right? Like, that's an important thing in our house, embracing and supporting different ways of life and being. And yeah, they just don't need they don't need my money. It's really that simple.
Bingo. Yep. I'm right there with you. Yeah, absolutely. So.
Okay. So before we dive in for our next one, I am going to say we're moving on to the ones where the kids actually helped us. And I have made a very conscious decision to try to be careful with how much I share about my kiddo on social media and in the podcast. So today we will be referring to him as Winston, after Winston Churchill. If you have listened to very many of our episodes, you know that he's a little history nerd and he knows a lot about Winston Churchill. We went to the museum and stuff like that. So we had to randomly pick a pseudonym, and Winston it is. So if you hear Winston, that's my kiddo.
It's a perfect fit. I love it. It is wonderful. All right. So also, if you've listened to us before, you know that we have a Buy Us a Coffee where you can make small contributions like $5-10 towards the podcast, just to offset kind of our cost for the podcast. And, just a thank you. Like, I love your content. Thank you. So there's links for it everywhere in our podcast descriptions and in our social media bios and stuff like that. We wanted to say that all of the donations that come from this week's episode will be split between my kiddo, Liam, and Amanda's kiddo, Winston. So when you send your Buy Us a Coffee, there's a little note section. And if you just put a little note that says, like, for Liam and Winston, we will split it up because they put in hours and hours, right? And I know I promised mine some Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and I think you had a deal on your end too, right, Amanda?
Yeah, I had to promise Legos.
Yeah. But they put in a lot of time. So if you want to say thank you for making your homeschool research lighter, thanks to Liam and Winston, feel free to buy them a coffee.
All right. So with that, let's talk IXL. IXL for us was pretty good. I liked this probably the best of the paid ones that we tested for this episode. I don't know, you have a little bit more information on how much you spent and what the different options were. We went for the highest option because we wanted to test all of the things. And I personally wanted to test the Spanish because my kiddo has been in Spanish for a couple of years. So what did you find with the actual pricing, Meagan?
So I liked how flexible the pricing was, in that depending on what you wanted, you could kind of take what you wanted and or needed, right? So for $19.95 a month, and this is 2024 pricing, this episode will live on forever on the interwebs. So, but currently $19.95 for math, language arts, science, and social studies. You could also do $15.95 a month for math and language arts. You can do $9.95 a month to choose one or the other. So all math or language arts. And then to any of those, you can add Spanish for $5 a month. So even at the highest level of all the subjects plus Spanish, you're still talking $25 a month. So not a terrible amount of money. But I really liked how you could take what you needed, which is, I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah. And if you're under some kind of an umbrella school, like in California or something like that, it's absolutely worth touching base with your teacher of record and seeing how that works. I know that our public homeschool charter has licenses for IXL for $30 for the entire year.
Oh.
So yeah, there might be options. And
Yeah.
I would guess with pricing like that, you might be able to get in on a group buy that's much cheaper than the monthly rate as well. So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, there are options.
Yeah. You want to run through your feedback, what you thought of the platform, and then I can do mine. We can kind of go back and forth. Does that work?
Yeah, sure. So I have to say, generally, I had a really hard time figuring out how to set up a kids account. I don't know if it was easier on your end. Like I even went to Google and was like, how the frick do I do this? And Google did not really help me. So ultimately I just logged into my account and then he worked as a student within like my account login. Like we just had the one login. I could not figure out how to get it to let me set up an individual student account, which we were able to do on basically everywhere else. So I don't know where that disconnect was or why we had such problems. And then also with IXL, you can do just like 5th grade, though I'm not really sure why you would. And if you're confused on why you should differentiate your kiddos learning at home, like please join us, join our Patreon, come to some of our socials and chat with us about it. We will talk with you about that. Or, like book a full private session with us. But like differentiated learning is where it's at. And so I can't imagine why you would do just 5th grade within IXL. That said, it does have a diagnostic action or a diagnostic that the kids can take. And then after they take it, you get a diagnostic action plan. So for that more individualized learning, it says the diagnostic takes 45 minutes per subject. I don't know what you found, Meagan. In our house, like it offers you, like, do you want to answer an ELA question or a math question? Do you want to answer an ELA question or a math question? And the kid just gets to keep answering these questions and it figures out like, oh, they know this, they don't know this, they should work on this topic, they should work on this unit, like they know this one, they've passed this, they've graduated that. And generally it works well, except my kiddo just kept going and going. Yeah. And like 3 hours in, he was still doing the diagnostic and completely like, what the hell is happening? So don't do that to your kid. Like, because the thing is with each question that they answer, it assigns them a unit that they can or should do. And so you can just have them do even 20 minutes of each or, just 30 minutes answering different questions, and it will give you some things to work on. So to give you an idea of what you get, and, I thought that it was good and bad, right? Generally, I appreciated the way it worked. So for example, in math, it says 1 recommended skill, understanding decimals expressed in words, 5th grade skill. 1 recommended skill, domain and range of functions, 8th grade skill. 1 recommended skill, fractions equivalent to whole numbers, 3rd grade. And now my kiddo was really upset about that because he's working on like multiplication and division of fractions right now in like his regular math curriculum. And he was like, what are they talking about? So, it's kind of hit or miss. And then the funny thing is after he did this, the next day I got an email saying that he'd completed a skill and he had a certificate. I clicked it open and it said that he had completed 1st grade math. And I was like, I don't even know what's happening here. Like, so, from that regard, it could be a little confusing, right? For new parents, especially who don't fully understand where their kiddo is and how to differentiate learning. We've been doing it for several years. And I know I have a very asynchronous learner. I have a pretty good idea of where he's at on a lot of things. So I was able to just like roll with it and whatever. But I can see if you're just getting started, some of this stuff might be a little confusing. Mm-hmm. And then there was like in the reading, the ELA stuff, and not trying to brag on him, but it has reading strategies. You've reached the highest level on IXL for reading strategies. Keep it up. Well, I mean, that's great, but he's only in fifth grade and I want him to practice reading strategies. So give me some reading strategies options, like,
Right.
and then like vocabulary, they're all 10th grade options. Oh, and 11th grade, actually. So there's nothing below 10th and 11th grade for vocabulary skills they've recommended. Like that seems a little high.
Well, and
I mean,
even
like,
still, if he starts there, he'll be out of it. Then in like 6 months, he'll get the same thing. You're like, we're done.
yeah, that's it. Before the end of fifth grade, he'll be basically finished with
All
all
the
of their
words.
ELA stuff.
Congratulations.
Well, yeah, that's it, right? It was the same with writing strategies, which is, I mean, he does have a writing learning disability. So he's not at 11th grade in writing strategies. I mean, like, they're just things that I'm like, so I question how rigorous all of it is, but I did like it, generally speaking, right? And I think, if you're differentiating learning and you've got a kid who's a really asynchronous learner, you have to be on top of it more than a lot of other parents. So I'm not hugely surprised by it and we could make it work, but there are some weaknesses in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. So, okay. So aside from pricing, my kiddo was kind of neutral on it. So that was good. I liked the fact that there was an assessment. I'm thankful Amanda warned me that it would go on for a week and a half if I didn't put a stop to it. So she did that one before I did. So I was like, excellent. I liked the fact that you could link within the website to the South Carolina state standards, which is where I live. And then you can find the lessons that align with those state standards. Now, I myself personally, I don't give a shit what the South Carolina school system is doing. I would never look at that for myself. But if you're new to homeschooling, it might be reassuring. If you're only planning to homeschool for 6 months or a year due to like a medical issue, and so you fully plan to stay on state, then it's there, right? So that was pretty cool. I liked the fact that it was there. Okay, so the lessons work towards mastery in our experience, right? So it kept feeding him questions, and then there was this percentage that would fluctuate as he would work, and it would tell him, so if you got one right, you would get closer to the percentage that it was looking for, and if you got one wrong, it would drop back down. And so I liked the fact that you could kind of see that, because sometimes I feel like when you're doing online stuff and it's just feeding you questions, you're like, oh my gosh, when is this ever going to end, right? And so it was nice to kind of see that you have like a goal that you can aim for, and we'll get to the kids' notes in a second, but when it related to that, my kid said it felt super gamified, like because you're watching that number. And so he was like, oh, like get that number up. So he liked that one. So I can, in IXL, I can assign work, or IXL can recommend work. The UI wasn't amazing, which to your point, Amanda, like some of it, did you find like it was less clunky once you actually got in it, aside from not being able to set up an account for your kiddo?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was okay once we got in it, and I just gave up on having like his own account. And I didn't say, but honestly, we may keep IXL and use it for some supplemental stuff. I don't envision a world where it would be our main thing, but there were enough things about it that I thought, yeah, this could be good for supplemental work for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I felt like it was like a little bit clunky, but it wasn't terrible. I figured it out. Anything new is going to be clunky, I feel like, too, in the beginning for the most part. They have certificates and rewards if that's your jam. I liked the reporting. I felt like the reporting was easy to access. It was easy to digest. You can see roll-up level information. You can see question level detail. So I thought that was pretty cool also. So how about Winston? What were Winston's thoughts, Amanda?
So I think because this was the one that he had most recently done, and he keeps or he was keeping like a Google Doc of like a brain dump information, and then he was putting it into like a more, here's the feedback for you. So he didn't have the more consolidated feedback for me, and so I got the brain dump, and so I got some really funny quotes from him on IXL. So he said, there was a brain wrecking diagnostic test that caused me to lose a tiny bit of my sanity, but he also wanted me to assure you that he got it back. He actually did not feel that there was a gamified aspect to it. There was no game room. There were no badges.
Right.
And the number going up and down, it didn't read that way for him. And that's probably because he does, he has to do iReady for the program that we're in. And iReady has a number that goes and you finish it, right? Like you follow it along and you know how far you are in the diagnostic, and then you're done. And so for him, that kind of number tends to be equated to like, well, why am I not done?
Oh,
more
like
so than
percentage to
like,
completion.
yeah, more so than like a
Oh.
mastery, like going up and down, but like oh, I'm getting further away from being done. Like, how come I'm not done kind of thing. So, depending on where your kid's coming from, that might need to be a conversation to help them feel more comfortable with it. He said the content was short, quick questions that you could easily answer. And he did generally like that. He thought it was pretty easy to answer and move on. He liked that you could pick which skills you were going to work on next instead of just generally like, you did this, now you have to do that. He likes to be able to pick and choose and move through things, which I think most kids do, right? He did say sometimes it wasn't very kind. For example, one of the questions wanted multiple answers. You were supposed to type in several things in math or something like that. And he only entered one. And the one that he entered was a correct answer, but it didn't have all of the other answers. And instead of prompting him, like, there are more, like, this is an incomplete answer or whatever, it just marked it wrong. The whole thing was wrong instead of like half credit or something like that. And there was no way to go back and fix it. And he was like, very much not a fan of that.
I love that he noted it as unkind, though. Like, what a sweet little soul he is. I love that.
So let's see. He also said the IXL platform for him seemed easy to navigate. He could go to whichever thing he wanted without very much effort. So he found it pretty easy to get around in. But it was still only his second favorite of the curriculums that we looked at for this episode. It was his favorite of the paid ones.
Mm-hmm.
So how about your kiddo? What did Liam have to say?
He was neutral on the whole thing. He was like, it doesn't make me want to stick a fork in my eye, which we'll get to that option soon. But it wasn't his favorite. He had another, ironically, the same as Winston. They had the same favorite, which I thought was awesome. I felt like that was a really good test, too, of this. Like, they're very different. They're different learners. They're different ages. They come from different homeschool environments. They're just different people. And yet they still landed in the same spot with no prompting between the two of us. That was pretty cool. Yeah. He thought the questions were clear and easy to understand, same as Winston. He thought trying to find stuff was weird. That's what I got. Weird. This is what happens when you partner with a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old for an analysis. It's just weird. I was told the UI isn't amazing, but he didn't dislike it, right? It was just fine, So that's not a bad review from a kiddo. I can take that,
That's it. It's supposed to be a complete all-in-one curriculum. So, a kid who granted he's on the more academic end of things, but he's an unschooler. So for like a neutral, hey, all-in-one curriculum, like that's not bad.
How was the Spanish, by the way? You wanted to test the Spanish, which we did not.
So we actually haven't tested it yet.
Okay.
We were running short on time. And so I actually, instead of canceling more quickly, I decided to go ahead and keep it for the whole month so he can still try the Spanish out.
Nice.
This week, actually, he's supposed to be doing it. And hopefully we'll see how that goes.
There you go. We can always add it as a follow-up to a future or something.
Yeah. I mean, at some point, we really probably should talk about how to do foreign language and the options for foreign language for your kiddos in homeschool, because I feel like that's a whole other beast, right? Like trying to figure out what that looks like and how to do that and how much it matters and why it might matter, right? But yeah, so that's IXL. Like
that's IXL.
The kids liked it fine. The parents liked it fine. There was nothing that was, like, oh, absolutely not. So, I think.
A-okay.
Yeah, a perfectly good option.
Yeah, I liked it. All right, next up is Time for Learning, which was a little bit pricier. Time for Learning has two different plans. One is pre-K through 5th grade, which just, I don't know if you agree, Amanda, but like just saying that out loud, please don't put your pre-K kid like in front of a computer. Like they don't need it, right? Save your $29.95 a month, right? It's too much. But so pre-K through 5th is $29.95 a month. If you want to pay it annually, there's a 10% discount, 30% off for each extra student. You can start, stop, or pause anytime, but I should note that there's a fee for pausing. So FYI. And so that includes adjustable grade levels, engaging interactive lessons, worksheets, assessments, educational playground, and customizable dashboard. And then 6th through 12th grade, the price goes up. It's $39.95 a month. Same thing, 10%, 30% for additional students, etc., all of that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit of a pricier option. So It goes K through 12 all the way through, which was good. There are report card functions, transcript functions, diploma functions. But if you're picking a platform just because they offer you a transcript, it's so easy to find. Like, do whatever you want. Pick a platform that's what. There's plenty of people that will help you build a transcript. We just did a ton of episodes on it. I mean, there's so many options. Like, don't make that your deciding factor. Like, I'm scared of transcripts, which many people are, so you're not alone. I'm not picking on you. But like, so we will use this one because they will do my transcript for you. I haven't seen the transcript either, but something tells me you're going to need to customize it anyway, because odds are good that you're doing stuff outside of time for learning and supplementing and stuff like that anyway, just life stuff and electives and things like that. So
yeah, well, that's it. And the thing is too, you can take the $15 a month that you would be saving by doing the full package over at IXL. Save that $15 a month every month that you do, and use that to pay someone to do the transcript for you. Right?
Exactly.
There are people that you can give them all of the information and all the stuff, and they'll put it together for you if you feel like you just can't figure it out. You know, you can't use the teachers pay teachers template and make it work kind of thing. Like this, it does not have to be the only reason that you do this.
Exactly. Yeah, I totally agree. Let's see what else. From my perspective, there's a course map for each grade. So if you're worried about quote unquote missing something, which as new homeschoolers, sometimes people are very concerned about that. So, okay, no problem.
Yeah. And I will say we still do that, right?
Yeah.
I know that we can be outliers when it comes to certain ways of homeschooling, but I do still look at the state standards each year, not because I want to make sure that we hit it the way the state does, but because I'm just one person, right? And I want to make sure that we didn't forget to cover X, Y, or Z, right? Like, yeah, I didn't really think about natural resources and how that impacted the way people settled in the state of California. And I'm not from California, so I know some, but I don't know all of California history by any stretch of the imagination. So when I saw that that was something we were supposed to do in fourth grade, it prompted me to go and look into that a little bit more so that we could have better discussions and to come up with a field trip or two to do to help encourage that conversation, right? So being able to kind of go back and look and see like things that were supposed to be covered.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's missing something, but it's not really about that, right? It's just helping make sure that if you see something that you're like, oh yeah, I do want my kid to know that, and I feel confident in teaching it, or I do want my kid to know that, I don't feel competent teaching it.
I will outsource that. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Or I will go take a class so that then I can, you know.
No. Or we'll take it together, you know, or we'll watch a documentary together. There are lots of things that we learn together because I want him to know, but I don't know, right? I'm a product of the public education system. Whether you're a product of public education or private education, lots of things have changed.
Yeah.
Our understanding of things, our knowledge of things have changed in the last 30 to 40 years. And there's no shame in learning new facts and new things. Right?
Yeah.
Anyway.
I totally agree. So yeah, you've got a roadmap either way, like your plan or this one that's there, and good to go, which is awesome. The reporting function was easy to use. I could see grades. I could see time spent, activities completed. So easy enough. You can download the report into Excel or a PDF really easily. So if you're answering to a state, you know, governing body or your accountability teacher, in your case, Amanda, or, you know, doing your annual portfolio review in Florida or whatever, and you want to print that out and pop it in there, you're good to go. So easy enough. They have a game room called Time for Fun. There's an art gallery where you can submit work. There's time for languages. We did not try it, but it exists. So I mentioned earlier that you can freeze your account. So like during the summer, if you want to freeze or something like that, you can. It costs $5.99 per month to freeze. If you don't freeze it, you will lose all your data. So you're kind of locked in. That's like one of the things, right? Where if you take a break from it, you kind of have to freeze it if you're thinking, oh, we might go back, because otherwise you're going to be missing your data. I was able to manually adjust Liam's math level and bump him up into a higher grade level. But I think I'm still a big fan of a placement test for as non-academic as I am. I just like a placement test. I don't know. It's like, it gives me, there's comfort in a placement test for me. So I would have preferred that. And then I'm a huge fan of knowing what kind of service is available, right? So Time for Learning has a big thing where they promote 14-day free trial. So we were like, okay, great, let's sign up. And, you know, I was like, we'll do the thing and then I'll cancel it within 14 days. So apparently at some point, probably like 8 years ago, I trialed time for learning. And so because with a kid who would have been 4 at the time, this kid who was doing the testing now. And so when I went to cancel, it didn't say anything about, free trial or anything like that. And I was like, huh. So I sent a message to their customer service department and they were like, oh, because you used time for learning like 1,000,001 years ago. I'm like, it wasn't even the same kid, right? So like, okay, fine. And clearly it was like years and years ago. But I will say they answered really quickly. So like that's what you want from a customer service department. At least they answered really quickly and all that. If it were me, I'd probably be like, yeah, that was 1,000,000 years ago. Our program has evolved light years since then. This isn't even the same kid. No problem. We'll honor it. But they didn't. But whatever. Like that. I'm sure it was in the fine print and I didn't see it. So like no big deal. But I will cancel it. But yeah, at least they responded quickly. So that was a plus for me. How about you from the grown-up side, Amanda?
Yeah, so on my side, I thought it was easy enough to sign up. And I did like that there was the 14-day money back guarantee. I will note that if you cancel in the 14 days, you lose access as soon as you cancel. So I was like, oh, I better do that before I forget. And I went in to do it and was like, you'll lose access immediately. And my kiddo was not finished reviewing it and looking at it. And so then I had to just like set a reminder a week out. It's not a huge deal, but if your kid's in the middle of something that they want to finish and you want to cancel, like just be aware that if you cancel, they're not going to be able to finish what they're working on. For me, we were able to sign up for the cheaper K-5 program, but I found it a bit annoying. Like they really push this idea that kids can access one grade above and one grade below, but it didn't feel like you could easily access a grade above when you had a 5th grader who was in the K-5 or pre-K-5 thing, right? It felt like that 5th grade was like really the limit. And then as we just talked about, right, 5th grade is not really where he's at in a lot of things. And so, even though on paper and here in California, he's registered as a 5th grader, we really probably needed to sign up for the older one. And like, I don't know, that was one of those things that just kind of felt a little unfair with the way the system works.
Well, and even still, why only one grade above and one grade below anyway? I mean, there's some kids who are wildly accelerated or working, a few grades below, which is totally fine. But let's make it a smooth and easy process for them. So that, because the more that I imagine too, like a kid who's quote unquote behind, right? They're a 5th grader functioning at a 2nd grade or a 3rd grade level. They're going to have to watch their parent jump through all these hoops to get them access to that thing. And it's just going to feel lousy, right?
Yeah.
Just make it easy.
If you can't figure out the math that you've been given or whatever, and then it takes a month to be able to get access to the, so, I mean, it was that thing. I felt like it wasn't very good for the whole differentiated learning, right? And especially, all kids are asynchronous to an extent. And then if you have a twice exceptional kiddo, you have probably a very asynchronous learner. And this was just not friendly for that. And also foreign language is only an option for the high school level. So because we signed up for the K-5, there was no foreign language option in it. Which I was not crazy about, especially if this is supposed to be an all-in-one curriculum, right?
Yeah.
Like we know that exposing kids to foreign language at a younger age is good if you care about foreign language. So why can you not access it until high school? So I know Meagan liked the reporting. We actually had reporting issues. So Winston swears that he was in there reading things and doing stuff and maybe not doing like a specific lesson, like answering questions, but that he was in and like actively working in the program. But Time for Learning didn't show that he even logged on that day. And so like it was pretty heated in our house around Time for Learning. And he was really like, I hate Time for Learning, right? Like if I'm going to get in trouble for not even being on there and doing anything, even though I wasted my time on that platform. That did not end up being his overall feeling. But on that day when I got the report and I was like, what is this? It says you were only on there one day. And he was like, no way. I've done 3 days on Time for Learning. And I'm like, not according to the report, so I guess, just be aware of that it might not necessarily track everything they're doing. And you might have to be a little bit more involved if you care about and are tracking that sort of thing. I did like the fact that it had printable worksheets. Of all the ones that we looked at, it's the only one that I know for sure that has quite a few printable worksheets. If you have a kiddo who needs to get off of the screen, if it works better for them to be able to write things down, if you have a kiddo who has a writing problem, but they want to be able to do some writing, right? If you have the worksheet printed off, instead of them trying to copy all of the problems on the paper and then do it, like printable worksheets can be a really good thing. And I did like the fact that this one had that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like it. And then how about Winston? Besides not having his hours counted, what did he think about
Yeah.
for learning?
So he said that it was really easy to find classes, and it had a simple user interface. He really appreciated the intro video that Time for Learning had at the beginning that explained, how to move around the website and do things like that. He said, this is another one of those examples where like, clear as mud, thank you very much. It was fun, but sometimes it became really boring. And I was like, okay, so, what was fun, right? And so the best that I got out of it was that the way they teach was sometimes fun, but it becomes boring when they share multiple slides with very little information. So apparently some of the videos are good, some of the slide presentations not so good. And he said that the videos were oftentimes wordy and slow. Let's see. Though he did say that some of the lessons he did, especially ELA, he felt they were difficult, but the good kind of difficult. They definitely focused on a different type of grammar than what we are doing in our own homeschool. So I know for a fact that was what he found in ELA. There was one that he was like, I have no idea what they're talking about. And he had to actually go in and listen to everything to try to pass that exam or unit or whatever it was. He also said that he liked the small game room with educational games. He said there were some great educational games, and there were time limits, but he thought they were okay. What he didn't know was that I set them up. And so, yeah, on the parent side of it, you can go in and say how much time you expect them to work and then how much time they get to play in the educational game room. I think I had it set at like 15 minutes and then 5 minutes, like 15 minutes of classwork and then 5 minutes of play. But we were just coming off of the iReady testing, the assessment, and it does that, right? The kids have to answer so many questions and then they get to play this game, and then they answer so many questions and they get to play a game for like a brain break. So, he was just kind of in that mentality. I think he might have felt differently about it if we were a few more weeks removed from the iReady diagnostic testing that we just done.
Makes sense.
Let's see. That's what he had. So what did Liam have for us?
Okay, this was the I'd rather stick forks in my eyes for Liam experience. And it was so funny because I was like, I see, if you've looked at any of these platforms, the retargeting ads on social media are pretty intense, right? And so every homeschool influencer on the planet is doing a Time for Learning ad right now with a code, a referral code and all this kind of stuff.
Well, and also because Time for Learning, they pay their influencers well.
Yeah.
So I handle our affiliate marketing stuff, and I will say that the ones that we disliked the most are the ones that pay the most for people to push them. And so if we cared just about the money, we could make a lot more money by pushing Mia Academy and Time for Learning because they pay their influencers well.
Yep. Because I said to Liam, I was like, well, there goes that paycheck, Liam. Because I was like, once I get on there and say, I didn't know Winston's feedback at the time, but I was like, once I get on there and say your feedback, I'm not really sure Time for Learning is going to be knocking on our door to pay for advertising or whatever. But yeah.
Your kids hated it and you didn't particularly like it. Would you like to tell people to sign up for it? And I'm sure there are people out there who are like, it's great. We'd never use it, but it's great. Use my link. That's not us. So yeah, there we are.
It's very true. Liam's feedback was the videos are so boring. And if it's a topic that because there's no assessment, he ended up with a bunch of videos for stuff that he already knew really, really well. There's no option to speed them up. There's no option to fast forward. The speeding up thing too, I will say from an accessibility perspective, a lot of ADHD kids like to watch things at 1.5 or 2x, right? That's the regular speed is too slow for them. So from an accessibility perspective, having that option is nice. And he gets very frustrated when it doesn't exist. So I had Liam try the algebra class, specifically in math. because he just finished a full year of like honors algebra and then took a college algebra class over the summer. So listen, I get it. Liam's good at math, right? There's, in the land of autism, there's like loves trains and there's, loves Liam's is loves numbers, right? Like, so there's different, skill sets like neurotypicals, right? But in the land of autism, it can be a very hyper focused skill set, and he's good with math. So I get that. But he was like, this is algebra that I did like a million years ago, right? Like this is beyond basic algebra. So he felt like the rigor wasn't there also for the math, which he was disappointed in because he loves doing math. He said some of the videos that he watched were out of date. So if it was a video where they were showing you like how to do something on Time for Learning, some of the screenshots of Time for Learning that were in the video, it telling you like where to click or something, were out of date. And so then when he'd actually go to the interface, it didn't look like that. And he was like, well, that's not helpful. So that was one. He had a couple things where a couple of buttons didn't work, etc. He was doing a math problem where he had to answer something graphing related, and there was an image of a graph, like an X and Y axis with plots and whatever, and he couldn't make it any bigger, and he would get frustrated because he's like, this is so freaking small. How much? And he's on a full-size laptop, he's got 2 monitors in his room and all that, but they're really, unless he was going to expand his browser window itself, which he could do, but Time for Learning didn't have like a zoom option for you to be able to see the graph more clearly, so that bugged him. Okay, he said on the quizzes, all the multiple choice questions only have one viable answer. The other 3 are ridiculous. Like, they're so absurd that if you get this question wrong, it's just you weren't reading at that point, right? So, it looks like you're doing amazing on the reports and stuff like that, but he's like, these are the dumbest questions ever. I mean, he was sitting next to me doing math, and it'd be like, which number bigger, which number smaller? Like, he was speaking like Cookie Monster, where he's like, this is so basic, right? So he did not like it. I would get text messages while he was working on it that I would share with Amanda, where he'd be like, well, there's 30 minutes of my life I'm never going to get back again. So it was not good. And then the last thing was, and I'm so sad that I think this reference will be lost on you, Amanda, but if you get the reference and you're listening, please in the comments tell Amanda she needs to watch Schitt's Creek. So in season 1 of Schitt's Creek, the whole premise of the show, they lose all their money. They're really rich. They lose all their money. They end up in this motel, right? So the mom and the son decide to do this MLM for skincare. They get this stuff, and they're watching this video, this like starter video from their team lead person, right? And she's all made up with like this tropical background. And she's like, I'm going to share with you tips and tricks. And the whole video is just telling people tips and tricks. And there never are tips and tricks. The skincare line is called Allez-vous. And it is one of the funniest episodes on Schitt's Creek, in my opinion. And Liam was like, this feels like watching an Allez-vous video. Like, he's like, that's all I've got from this. So Time for Learning wasn't a hit in my house.
And I will say that I have heard, and I didn't actually take any of the lessons in Time for Learning. I left that to my kiddo. So I don't know for sure how easy it would be. But based on Liam's feedback, I have heard parents say that their kids were able to figure out how to game the system in Time for Learning, where they weren't actually really learning as much as they wanted them to, and like actually integrating it in a critical thinking kind of way. But they had just kind of figured out how to like get through the units and call it good. So.
Yeah. He said the checkpoint quizzes were so ridiculous. So probably not the best assessment of whether or not your kid actually got the concept based upon Liam's feedback, but we shall see.
Yeah, there we go. All right. So it's not a huge surprise, but we've gotten a little wordy here. We can be verbose from time to time. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up now. And we will be back next week with part 2 to make your listening life a little bit easier.
Exactly. So stay tuned. And in the meantime, happy homeschooling.
Have a great one.